I was convicted of sending messages I had never written from an account I had not accessed, using a device that the forensic officer had examined and cleared without noticing that the timestamps on every single message had been altered after the messages were created. I work in IT. I have worked in IT for 11 years. I know what altered metadata looks like. I knew it when I first saw the evidence bundle, sitting in my solicitor's office, looking at the timestamps on the messages that were supposedly mine. I said to my solicitor, "These times are wrong." He said, "I'll get an expert to look at it." The expert looked at it. The expert agreed with me. The Crown's expert had been the police forensic officer, and he had not looked closely enough, and I was convicted anyway. That is the summary. The rest of this story is the detail of what it costs to be right about something when the system has already decided you are wrong. My name is not the important thing here. What is important is the account. There had been an allegation of harassment, messages sent over a period of 6 weeks to a former colleague, in tone escalating from hostile to threatening. The messages had come from an account associated with my name and email address. The police had conducted a forensic examination of my devices and accounts. The forensic officer had concluded that the account had been accessed from my usual devices and locations, and that the messages were consistent with my authorship. He had not run a metadata integrity check. I want to explain what that means in plain language because it matters enormously. Every digital file has metadata. Data about when it was created, when it was modified, and what device or system processed it. In a forensic investigation of digital communications, a metadata integrity check verifies that the recorded timestamps are consistent with the system logs, meaning that the file's history has not been interfered with. It is a standard procedure. It is in the forensic examination protocols published by the College of Policing. It is not optional. The forensic officer had not done it. I know why he did not do it, and the why is not malicious. It is bureaucratic. He had a high caseload. The account data matched my credentials. The messages had come from my usual IP range. Everything on the surface was consistent. He had not dug deeper because the surface was convincing, and he had 17 other cases in the queue. I understand all of that, and it still cost me 14 months. 2 minutes in. I need you to understand what it feels like to know you are right about something in a language the court does not speak. I could see the timestamps. I could see they were wrong. I understood technically and with certainty that the messages had been created at the times they claimed and then had their timestamps altered to shift them into my active hours. I could see the gap between the creation metadata and the modification metadata. It was there. It was visible to anyone who looked. Nobody had looked. My solicitor obtained an independent digital forensics expert, a man called Andrew, specialist in mobile and account forensics, with the particular quality of someone who takes his time and is not interested in being wrong. Andrew spent 4 days with the data. His report was 28 pages long. The central finding was 2 paragraphs. The timestamps on the disputed messages had been modified after the messages were created. The modification occurred during a 2-hour window on a Sunday evening. And the IP address from which the modification had been made was not associated with any device registered to me and had not appeared in any of my account logs before or since. Not my IP address. The modification had been made from somewhere else by someone else to create a timeline that pointed at me. The midpoint arrived when my solicitor submitted Andrew's report to the Crown Prosecution Service, and they declined to discontinue the prosecution. Their position was that the forensic officer's analysis was sufficient and that the defence expert's findings were a matter for the jury to weigh. My solicitor described this in measured professional language as a disappointing response. He also filed a formal complaint against the forensic officer under the Code of Practice for Victims and the Criminal Procedure and Investigations Act. The complaint alleged that the failure to conduct a metadata integrity check constituted a failure of the duty of disclosure and a material breach of the forensic examination protocol. The complaint was filed on a Thursday. By Monday, the CPS had received a call from the police forensic unit. By Wednesday, my solicitor received notification that the prosecution was being reviewed. By Friday, the charges were discontinued. The timeline of that week tells its own story. The counter lawsuit was filed the following month against the Metropolitan Police, alleging negligent forensic examination and malicious prosecution. I want to be clear about why I filed it, not for the money. The settlement, when it came, was modest and covered legal fees, with a remainder that I will not specify because the terms include confidentiality. I filed it because Andrew's report showed that the metadata check was in the protocol. The protocol was not followed. I was convicted. Those three facts in sequence constitute a chain of causation that deserve to be named in a formal legal process, even if the formal legal process moved slowly and settled quietly and produced no admission of wrongdoing. No admission of wrongdoing. That is the bittersweet part. The charges were dropped. The complaint produced an internal review of the forensic officer's procedures. The civil settlement was reached. Nobody said we got this wrong. The person who altered the metadata was never charged. The investigation into who made the modification from an unregistered IP on a Sunday evening was opened and then effectively stalled when the criminal charges against me were discontinued because the discontinuation removed the urgency. I know who I think it was. I cannot say it here. The investigation is technically ongoing. I am back at work. The 14 months are a gap in my CV that I now explain as a personal matter when I'm asked, and I have learned to say it in a way that closes the conversation rather than opening it. Most people accept that. A few ask what happened. I tell them I had a legal situation that was resolved in my favor. That is technically accurate. What I carry is the image of the metadata screen, the timestamp that was wrong, the gap between what was there and what should have been there, visible to anyone who looked. I looked, Andrew looked. The forensic officer did not look, and I spent 14 months in the gap between his looking and mine. If you work in IT and you are ever in a room where your technical knowledge is the only thing that stands between you and a wrongful conviction, find an Andrew quickly. Do not let anyone tell you that the expert has already looked at it.